Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today, we have been able to hear that Ukrainian forces are conducting a major breakthrough and overrunning Russian armed forces around the area of Kolotolovka as a second major Ukrainian offensive into Russia, and the first into the Belgorod region, is now beginning to unfold. We got information just hours ago, and footage showing Ukrainian forces engaging a Russian border checkpoint right outside the town of Kolotolovka and beginning to advance into the area. This comes just days after the Perez breakthrough was conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine just a few miles north of Gryvron, a Free Russian Army favored hotspot, as usually the Free Russian Army, when conducting incursions into Belgorod, picked the Gryvron and Shebekino axes to be able to conduct their advances. The Perez breakthrough was one that we noted heavily on this channel and stated that it may be the opening of a brand new offensive into the Russian Federation, or that it may be some sort of a ruse or a deception by the Ukrainian armed forces to lead Russian commanders into a very difficult dilemma. The Perez breakthrough was to give the Russians this kind of an ultimatum. Either they could start to divert valuable manpower that they really cannot spare into the Belgorod area to try and stop a possible offensive from happening in this direction, or they could completely ignore it, hope that a major Ukrainian offensive does not happen, which it would at that point, and divert all of their forces into Kursk and try and stop the Ukrainian breakthrough that is still rapidly advancing at this point. The Russians decided to focalize all of their manpower onto the ongoing Kursk offensive further north, and this left the Belgorod area pretty much unprotected and undefended for the large part by the Russian border guard forces and the Russian army as a whole. After the Perez breakthrough was successful for an entire 2 days, we're now on the third, we have now heard that the Ukrainians are conducting a heavy firefight right outside of Kolotolovka. We actually got to see that the footage is several hours old, and we've already heard that Ukrainian forces had rapidly advanced beyond the checkpoint, but it was around this exact area where this firefight had occurred, and we now understand that Ukrainian forces are most likely in Kolotolovka and have probably advanced rapidly from that point forward. We also got to hear of another major breach around the area of Prolese, whereas we got to hear information from Visegrad 24 letting us know that the Ukrainian army did conduct a decently heavy attack with armored forces around the area of Prolese, just north of Kolotolovka, and it now appears that there may have been a breach in this area as well to try and create a wider front and disperse Ukrainian forces, at least in the initial push across the border, over a wider front. This front is actually fairly significant, at least for an opening front. It is about 5 miles wide from Prolese to Kolotolovka, and it appears that the Ukrainians are conducting a battle plan that we actually hypothesized a few days ago, and apparently the Russians did not really expect this to be a likely outcome. The Perez breakthrough was never going to succeed as an actual anchor point for a major offensive. Perez has no major roadways connecting Ukraine to Russia, and therefore logistical supplies and sustainment abilities would be very difficult to conduct from a breakthrough area like Perez. The Ukrainians would have to find another area to try and advance into that would give them a major paved roadway, and not only that, access to a rapid advance route or a faster attack lane. That area is Kolotolovka. Kolotolovka is one of the few areas in the northern Belgorod Oblast that actually has a paved road crossing the border in between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. If the Ukrainians capture Kolotolovka, they will be able to rapidly advance down the roadways in all directions through the Belgorod Oblast and probably begin to either meet up with Ukrainian forces that are advancing towards Belaya in the Kursk region right now, or begin their own separate offensive to start attempting to encircle and cut off Belgorod from further resupply and reinforcements, putting Russian forces in Vovchansk into a wildly desperate situation where they can either retreat or attempt to hold their ground and most likely get completely encircled and then besieged until they surrender or are completely destroyed as a fighting force. This major offensive here in Belgorod has truly led to a collapse of the Russian border region, and is going to be renaming this campaign for us on this channel from the Battle of Kursk to the Battle of the Frontier, as this battle is now, well, more so campaign, is now being conducted across the entirety of the Russian-Ukrainian frontier from Belgorod to Kursk over an incredibly wide front line. we are most likely going to be seeing at this point that the Russian commanders are now faced with being reactionary more than proactive, and they most likely will start to send more brigades, stripping the Kursk defense quite heavily, but still sending more brigades into the area around Kolotolovka and Peraz, attempting to stop a further Ukrainian breakthrough in this area. Considering that Russian reinforcements that were brought in were only enough at the moment to be able to defend Kursk, the ability for the Russians to effectively defend Kursk and Belgorod, given the amount of forces that are in the area, which we assume is about 3 combined armed brigades at this point. That's our best estimate, and we don't even really know what kind of brigades those are, whether they're armored, mechanized, or motorized. We do understand that one of them is motorized. The 15th Brigade is clearly a motorized unit with some artillery support. Currently, we believe they're in the area of Rilisk or Lgov. We're not entirely sure, but the other 2 brigades that are inside of Kursk at the moment, we really don't know a lot about from the Russian side. We do see Russian armor that is present. We have seen T-62Ms and T-80 BVMs present within the theater, but we still don't really know a lot about those specific brigades. Clearly, one of them is maybe mechanized or armored, considering the presence of tanks and also some APCs, but we really don't know if both of them are mechanized, or both of them are armored, or if one of them's mechanized and armored, or the other way around. We're not entirely sure, and we also don't know the exact manpower and force of those units and where they may have ended up coming from. But those 3 brigades, out of the 3 of them, they probably will have to start to divert a brigade from the Kursk Oblast and further south and into the area of Belgorod. This one brigade will have to hold off the entire Ukrainian invasion force that is now moving across. At this moment, the offensive is so early on, we actually don't have an exact idea or a figure of how many brigades or how many battalions the Ukrainians will be involving in this offensive operation in Kolotolovka, but this one brigade will have to hold them off while the Russian command or leadership within the area tries to figure out where to strip more Russian forces from inside of occupied Ukraine to divert them rapidly into the Belgorod Oblast and trying to defend their rear flank at the Vovchansk front. This is probably going to end up creating a very bad situation for the Russian Federation, and an incredibly good one for the Ukrainians, as the Ukrainians will be meeting less resistance within the area of Kursk, considering that they're having to strip their defenses now to try and divert some towards Belgorod, and the Belgorod offensive probably will proceed fairly well, considering that they will probably outnumber the Russian forces about 3-1, which is an attacker's advantage. Moving on from that and out of the Kolotolovka area where this major offensive is going on, we also got major news today that a severe Ukrainian breakthrough has been conducted south of Sudzha, and Ukrainian forces are rapidly advancing towards the next major settlement near the border, the town of Belaya. The Belovsky district inside the Kursk Oblast has actually been ordered in evacuation yesterday, with the Kursk civil administration providing a large amount of buses and civil transportation to try and get these people out of the area and up to Kursk. There is a decent amount of people living within this area. We've approximated that it's in the tens of thousands, although we haven't been able to get an exact count on each village. We kind of got an overall view of the entire area of the district, and it seems as though there may be tens of thousands of people living here, meaning that once again, the Russian refugees situation in Kursk is going to be even further compounded by the massive influx of refugees that will be arriving. But just hours ago, we were able to confirm that Ukrainian forces were advancing unopposed through the village of Giri, which is just south of Belitsa. Given this fact, and given the fact that the Ukrainian forces, like all armed forces, are advancing on paved roads in this war, we would have to be under the assumption that the Ukrainians have taken over Ulanok, which is also along this roadway, the town of Nizhny Makovo, and Belitsa as well. We are not going to be assuming that they have taken Borky, Stbalnoy, or Krupets yet, as those are on the other side of the Spel River, and we're not really sure if the Ukrainians are advancing on both sides of the river at this point. After they advance from Giri and further down towards Belaya, there may be a smaller force, maybe a battalion-sized element that begins to move through that area and start capturing those villages. But still, that is all just hypothesis and guesswork. We don't really know at the moment what is going on with these villages south of the Sel River. But we can see Ukrainian forces moving through Giri, which is showing another major advance in the fourth major prong of this offensive so far since it started about 6 days ago. Here is the footage of Ukrainian armed forces moving through the town of Giri. We can hear the Ukrainian APCs rolling on down the road. And here in a second, we're about to actually see them. And right there, that appears to be some kind of a Ukrainian BTR-4. We
Пошел
can
в
see the
сторону
triangle marking on it
белой.
for the
В сторону
Kursk
белицы.
offensive
Пошел,
campaign.
пошел. Кресты, все как надо.
Once again, advancing through the town
Хуярит как
unopposed, a
надо.
major fact.
Крупнокалиберного пулемета, блядь. Ни флага, ничего. Пехоты тоже нету. Все, короче, как надо. Война, ребята, такая у нас сегодня интересная.
The fact that this Ukrainian BTR-4E is advancing unopposed through the town of Giri is a major fact that we have to put into the overall offensive picture. Considering that this unit is advancing unopposed through the town of Giri and we're hearing or seeing no Russian resistance nearby, we're not even hearing the faint sounds of artillery fire in the distance, this is showing that Russian forces have apparently focused most of their defensive efforts in between the area of Rilisk and the area around Kurchatov and the city of Kursk as well. It seems as though the Russians have completely abandoned a defensive effort around the area of Belaya, and this may also be why the Russians are largely ordering an evacuation from this area, while they're really not ordering an evacuation from any other area inside of the Kursk Oblast. This may also be showing that Russian forces are conducting a general retreat, attempting to fall back further into Kursk and try and regroup, so that way their forces are actually coherent and well coordinated, instead of the heavily uncoordinated mass of border guards that may be in this area at the moment. We are hearing once again today in official form that evacuations are being made from the area. According to a pro-Russian telegram, the operational headquarters of the Kursk region decided to evacuate residents from the Belovsky district, the acting governor said. The acting governor being the one that was on the Zoom call with Putin at the very beginning of the offensive. The Ministry of Transport of the Kursk region is organizing additional buses to transport residents of the border of the Belovsky district. This is once again showing us that the Russian Federation is expecting to lose this area very quickly, because they are giving absolutely no chance at all for the Russian forces to try and defend it. They are immediately conducting an evacuation, and given the footage that we're seeing today, which is showing Ukrainian forces much farther than they were yesterday by a total of about 10 miles, it is showing that the Ukrainians are rapidly advancing in this area. They are meeting absolutely no resistance, and the Russians have largely been defeated in this area, and the Ukrainians have achieved another major battlefield success, at least within the Battle of Belaya at this moment. Moving on from that, we did also get to hear major news that according to satellite footage, the Sudzha gas terminal does appear to have been heavily damaged, as we can see that some of the pumping buildings near to the southern end of the pipeline have been clearly damaged, one of them being obliterated, and some of the pipes appear to have also been ruptured as well by an artillery explosion that landed directly on top of some of the pipes near the Sudzha gas terminal. This may mean that gas access for Eastern Europe and also payments for that gas to Russia may be heavily curtailed, as the amount of gas that can be transported through the system is greatly reduced, considering that some pipelines no longer have the ability to function. This is, of course, a fairly serious ordeal for the Russians economically, and they'll probably be trying to figure out how to circumvent this lack of income that they're not getting from Eastern Europe and try and find another way to make ends meet. Although making ends meet economically in Russia is becoming harder and harder with every passing month. Meanwhile, inside the town of Sudzha, we were able to hear the announcement today from the Ukrainian General Staff that they control 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory. This is a major announcement. 1,000 square kilometers of territory has not been captured by either side in the war inside of the areas of eastern Ukraine since about the latter end of 2022. We have not seen a single side gain about 1,000 square kilometers in any single offensive so far. That includes the Russian Bakhmut offensive, the Russian Avdiivka offensive, the Russian Battle of the Kremena Forest, the Russian Battle of Kupiansk, the Ukrainian counterattack in the summer of 2023, the Ukrainian river war on the Dnipro area. We also see that they're conducting an offensive in the Krim-Burn Spit, which we'll get to in a minute, but that still has not gained 1,000 square kilometers of ground. Neither side, neither the Russians, with all of the major offensives that they've tried to conduct, including the Vovchansk offensive, and the Ukrainians have been able to achieve a 1,000 square kilometer gain of ground in any single offensive for nearly a year and a half at this point. The fact that the Ukrainians are conducting a major offensive and capturing this much ground this late into the war inside of Russia is showing that this is an overwhelmingly successful offensive, and that the Ukrainian armed forces are most likely going to be emboldened to drive even further and set higher campaign objectives, considering the great successes that they have seen so far. Meanwhile, we once again got to see another video of a Ukrainian combat vehicle driving through Sudzha, and once again showing that the town is completely cleared of enemy resistance, and also it seems of people as well. Maybe a large amount of the Russians have evacuated, but the city also appears to have taken very minimal damage from what we can tell.
Центральна площа Суджі.
But that's the end of that clip, still showing very clear, uncontested control by the Ukrainians of the town of Sudzha. Once again, clearing up the misconception that the town of Sudzha is somehow on an active front line, because in that clip, we didn't hear the sound of faint artillery explosions in the distance, suggesting that a front line would be nearby. The Ukrainians have clearly moved much farther beyond the eastern area of Sudzha, and are most likely around the areas that we have laid out on our frontline map here. Also, really quickly, a quick point out about this. If y'all want to see the footage that was at the Kolotolovka border checkpoint, sadly, I can't show it here on stream because the footage is a little bit rough, to be entirely honest. But if y'all want to see the footage for yourselves and see the actual Ukrainian firefight that was happening at the border at Kolotolovka, y'all can check that out by clicking on the link in the description below for the Day 901 map of the Ukraine-Israel conflict. We're also covering the Israel conflict in the background as well. Y'all can check it out there and see the video and picture evidence, because this channel always works off of a concept of picture and video evidence being required to make any kind of assertions or factual claims for our news credibility. But moving on from that and out of the area of Kursk, and of course the major unbelievable offensive that is happening in this area, we are also hearing of a shocking small level offensive that is happening on the very edge of the Kinburn Spit, near to the town of Pokrovsky. We were able to see that the Ukrainian flag is still flying over the Kinburn Spit, showing that the Ukrainian forces that landed here on August 9th, the Ukrainian Special Forces, are most likely still in control of this very southern tip of the Kinburn Spit. When you see the Ukrainian flag flying right there, still untouched by the Russians, and once again proving to us that apparently the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to make some sort of a landing on the Kinburn Spit. We are not expecting any kind of major armed action by Ukrainian forces in this direction. It would be incredibly difficult to sustain a viable supply network across the Dniprovska Gulf to support any forces that would be in this area. And not only that, due to logistical abilities of Ukraine not really having a navy, they aren't really able to support a large combat force at Pokrovsky as well. Meaning that this offensive will not really be going anywhere in any large form, but it will be providing a small distraction for the Russians in the Kherson area and making sure that they continue to divert more effort and resources, probably a smaller number, maybe a couple of battalions, into the area around Vasilivka to try and make sure that the Ukrainians don't just start to advance wildly behind Russian lines, pretty much unopposed, because no Russian forces are in that area. Meanwhile, moving out of Ukraine and down into Israel, we did get to hear today that the Israeli Defense Forces have stated that once again, northern Israel has been under a heavy amount of fire in the upper Galilee area from Iranian proxy forces inside of southern Lebanon. We were able to get pictures of this from the Israeli Defense Forces, proving the severity of the barrage. It seems as though there were a large amount of impacts within the area of the upper Galilee region, and according to the IDF, this attack is abnormally large, possibly suggesting that a future Iranian attack from Iran, launched by missiles and drones, could be highly possible here within a very short amount of time. Once again, we are starting to hear reports from major news organizations like Fox and CNN that a major attack will be coming from Iran within 24 hours. We are not reporting that as factual information. We're also not going to be issuing a timetable here on this channel because it seems as though the attack is going to be very unpredictable, and we're largely just going to have to wait and see when the attack actually occurs. Until then, we can't really say much about when an attack will occur. It does seem as though both sides are back on the path to war, and we will be waiting to see when that conflict, when that war starts to begin within the Middle East. It's inevitable at this point, and we will be making sure to cover that live whenever it happens. But still, that is the end of our short war summary today. I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to hit the like button, make sure to comment and subscribe, and if you would like, support us on Patreon. The link in the description is below. I got to give a massive shout out to everyone who subscribes. We thank y'all greatly for joining us. The channel has been exploding recently. We've gotten about 10,000 subscribers in about 3 days. And of course, you can join us here on the Enforcer channel and get these kinds of short war updates every single day. Also, a live stream every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 days a week, except for Monday, which is today. So there will be no live stream later on tonight on this day, but every other day you can always count on us to be here live at night covering the news of what's going on. Also, a huge shout out to everyone who's supporting us on Patreon as well. Those folks help us to be able to do this as our full-time job and help us to be able to put out these kinds of short war videos every single day. And so a massive shout out to those folks. And if you want to support this channel and help us to continue to make these kinds of video projects possible, you can go to Patreon and support us there. Link in the description below. But thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.